Hello, good morning and welcome to this lovely, beautiful summer morning. It's British summertime, but it's also pretty nippy here in sunny Kirkintilloch in Scotland. I have come just across the way from my own house to the basin at South Bank, which is just behind me, which is part of the fourth Clyde Canal. Interestingly, although it's literally just on my doorstep, the history of the Fourth Clyde Canal is something that I find utterly fascinating. It was originally, during the reign of Charles II, suggested that there should be some kind of waterway between Edinburgh and Glasgow, but it took until the mid-18th century before one was created. Work on that started in the 10th of June 1768. Now, it took 22 years for this to be completely created, and they worked from east to west, quite against type. The argument was that the Edinburgh promoters wanted to have a fairly deep kind of canal, which would allow seafaring vessels, but the Glasgow people wanted something that was a bit smaller. They were a little less keen at spending the cash. There was 7 years in those 22 years where what happened was that there was a hiatus, a stop, because of a lack of funds. Quite ironic given the lack of materials that are currently hampering our industries, our construction industry at the moment, partly I believe because of Brexit. But for 22 years they created from east to west this canal. Now behind me in South Bank in Kirkintilloch was the creation of a basin. In 1830 the Monklands and Kirkintilloch Railway put a terminus up, and the reason for that was that there were foundries created so that coal and iron ore were being brought here, and then they were being taken away in the finished products, and that's why the Lion Foundry became so important, I believe just along from here, although I'm going to do a little bit of digging to find out exactly where it was. So the basin here, as you can see, has got a number of vessels which are moored. There's a primary school just there. There's also the council buildings, Smudge's vet surgery, which she loves dearly, of course, being one of those healthy little cats who hardly ever needs to go to the vets. So this is where I've pitched myself, and during the course of the next few weeks I'm going to try and get along the trail, although next week I'm going to be in a very different place. I am not going to be in Kirky next week, and you can tune in and find out where that's going to be when I get there. So this week, what has caught my eye and what's been going on, I've been writing again for Talking Boys, and of course overnight, history was made for the very first British fighter to hold all 4 belts, the WBC, WBA, WBO and IBF, as well as the Ring Magazine belt at super lightweight over in Las Vegas, as Josh Taylor beat Ramirez on points, 114 to 112 on all 3 scorecards, having knocked Ramirez down twice. By heavens, he needed both those knockdowns to win, but he did it. Sam Eggington also managed to beat Molina in Coventry, so his career is certainly on the up and up and up, and what a first round demolition Stephen McKenna managed as well. So boxing, very, very healthy in terms of fighters from these shores this weekend. For Ringside Report, I've been looking at the career of Domingo Delia, an Argentinian boxer, as well as the Mentalist on television, and the 2 images of Glasgow that over the last couple of weeks have gone round the world, which is of course the disgraceful scenes that happened at George Square by football fans, and the incredible scenes, the Battle of Kenmure Street, where the local populace stopped the removal of 2 people accused of living in the UK illegally when the Home Office came in aid in order to take them away. For the Scottish Football Supporters Association, a couple of things to put up from last week, including my take on Conor McGregor's discussion with those and such as those at Celtic, Mr Dermot Desmond, over being involved in the club. Whereas this week I have focused principally upon Lewis Ferguson wanting away at Aberdeen, and also those scenes in George Square in Strict Liability, which has been something I've been thinking about all kind of week. Before I get there, one of the things I've not talked about for some time is what I've been listening to. I've been listening to Carlton Hobbs as Sherlock Holmes over the last couple of days, 1950s to 1960s. And again, the depiction of various literary characters suddenly become associated with various actors. David Suchet in the role of Hercule Poirot on television, but John Moffat in the radio. And Carlton Hobbs is certainly that type of actor who has given a definitive performance in the 50s and 60s from which it is difficult to deviate because of the power of his performance, which I found utterly and totally enthralling. Of course it's dated, of course it is very much of the 50s and 60s of its time, but it is also something that's an absolute delight. There are 7 series on BBC iPlayer, and my walks during the day have been really interesting to listen to his depiction. Of course, well-known tales and well-known stories, and no particular twists that come either from the production values or indeed from exactly how they have been performed, a very traditionalist way of doing it, but loved it nonetheless. Reviewing this week, I have had a look at Soho Theatre's The Boss of It All, and back on doing some of that during the course of the next week or so. The marking for A-level is beginning to dip, which is nice, although teacher assessed grades are going to be something we're all going to be in ICS Learn Limited talking about over the next wee while. So, what have I learnt this week, apart from Carlton Hobbs? The scenes in George Square and the subsequent things that have happened. First and most importantly, I think, all football fans have been besmirched, not just Rangers football fans. The fact is that the majority of people who do not follow football didn't see a scarf or an allegiance in George Square. They saw football fans. It doesn't matter how many images of the Tartan army abroad and the joy there is at having them at various different celebrations and attending games, and the way that they've been ambassadors for Scotland. The fact is that what the world saw was Scottish football fans parading themselves around George Square in the centre of Glasgow in a way in which it besmirched all of us. Then we had some clown deciding that it was going to be a good idea to mock up a video and exploit this opportunity to besmirch various people for anti-Catholic sentiment. Now, I don't think for a second that there are going to be people who would be surprised if anybody from a particular football club from either side were involved in sectarian sentiment against the other side, particularly those who might be ignorant of the history and what it actually means. I remember Robert Duvall, who was doing a shot at Glory, the film, and he turned up at Ibrox and they got him to wave a UVF scarf because he didn't know. So the influx of various players into both teams who might not have a handle on the sectarian history could be fooled into believing that this is quite normal. So, but to actually take that and attempt to create a video in order to cause the problems, which ended up at the Justice Secretary's table, I think is quite disgraceful. And along with the scenes in George Square, it should be pursued to the absolute nth degree. But the worst of it all is somebody who decided to use terror tactics to attempt to kill Peter Law. I can't think of any other reason why you would turn up in a balaclava with flammable material and attempt to set fire to somebody's house. Using terror tactics in order to promote your cause or to stop those who are against your cause in your own eyes, ears and head isn't just disgraceful, it's exceptionally worrying. people who are emboldened by the tactics of others, who participate in some kind of lawlessness activity, no matter how minor and no matter how major, are a menace to us all. And I hope that what happens is that not only those who have disgraced themselves in what happened at George Square, but those who have attempted to seek to take advantage for their own ends, either by being emboldened or kicking back, are also included in the utter condemnation that people feel for what happened. Not just ordinary people who've got no allegiance to football whatsoever, but football fans themselves, who will feel caught up in the imagery that has been promoted not just in Scotland or in the British Isles or in the United Kingdom, but also in Europe and across the world. So, with that kind of depressing thought in mind, here I am in somewhere that was created in the 1830s, which has endured. Certainly the lime foundry is no longer there. The movement of coal and various products are no longer part and parcel of this basin, which in the 19th century was so vital to the town of Kirkintilloch. Replaced with a primary school and a seat of learning, and also with a council office, which might not be a seat of learning at all. Until next week, it's bye for now.